140, 190 words. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Rosa gently held an elderly woman's trembling hands. "Take this one with food," she said softly, translating each word from the tiny label into Spanish. Behind them, a sharp sigh cut through the quiet. Edward Crane, pressed suit, gold watch, power in every gesture, checked his phone, his patience already gone. "Some of us have places to be," he muttered. Rosa didn't look up. "She just needs to understand her medicine, sir." Edward let out a dry laugh. "You'd think by now people would learn English." The laughter spread, quick, nervous, mean. The old woman flinched, whispering "pardon" under her breath. Rosa straightened, her voice steady but kind. "She's learning," she said, handing over the medicine. "We all are." The register beeped. The air felt thick, embarrassed silence where arrogance had just echoed. Edward snatched his receipt, still smirking, until his eyes fell on his own prescription label, and when he read the name printed beneath his, everything about his laughter changed. That night, long after the pharmacy lights dimmed, Rosa sat at her kitchen table under a flickering bulb. Her mother's medicine bottles lined the counter, each one labeled in English, each one she had carefully translated with a pen and a whisper. "Uno con desayuno, mamá." "One with breakfast," she murmured softly. Her mother, eyes clouded from untreated diabetes, smiled faintly. "You always make it sound simple." Rosa smiled back, hiding the ache in her voice. "One day we'll afford the better treatment." Across town, Edward Crane's mansion glowed like a lighthouse of money and emptiness. He signed contracts without reading them, glanced at people without seeing them. To him, life was just another transaction, fast, efficient, profitable. The next morning, he stormed into the pharmacy again, complaining, "You people really need to speed things up." "Time is money." Rosa didn't answer. She scanned the prescription he tossed on the counter, the same rare insulin her mother needed but couldn't afford. Edward tapped his gold card on the counter. "Must be nice," he said mockingly, "getting paid for just talking." The words stung, but Rosa didn't flinch. She looked up from the register, calm, unwavering, and met his eyes for the first time. There was no anger there, only quiet strength. A strength that unnerved him far more than any insult could have. Cliffhanger. And for the first time, Edward Crane, the man who thought he owned every word in the room, found himself speechless under the gaze of a woman who refused to shrink. Rosa's voice stayed soft, but her words carried a weight that filled the air. "People come here trusting these bottles, Mr. Crane," she said. "If the words aren't understood, they take the wrong dose. Sometimes they don't wake up." Edward crossed his arms, his gold cufflinks catching the light. "I own half this town, miss. People die every day. It's business." A few customers glanced at him, uncomfortable now, but no one spoke. Just then, the elderly woman from earlier appeared again at the door, waving timidly. "Señorita, I forgot my cane." Without hesitation, Rosa stepped from behind the counter and jogged across the street, her white apron fluttering in the wind. She guided the woman by the arm, smiling as she steadied her steps. Edward watched through the glass, something in that simple act clawing at his chest. It was the same compassion he'd lost years ago, buried under deals, deadlines, and pride. When Rosa returned, her manager glared. "You're not paid to take strolls, Rosa." Edward smirked, sipping his coffee. "Maybe she needs a raise." Impatience. Rosa didn't blink. She met his gaze and said calmly, "Maybe you need one in empathy." The room froze. A customer gasped quietly. Another murmured, "Good for her." Edward's smirk faltered. He looked around, suddenly aware that the power in the room had shifted, and he wasn't holding it anymore. Before he could respond, his phone rang sharply. He answered, irritated. Crane. But the voice on the other end wasn't his assistant. It was his doctor, Mr. Crane. "Don't take that medication we prescribed. There's a labeling error. It's the wrong dosage." His breath caught. The color drained from his face. He turned toward Rosa, who was calmly sorting labels at the counter. "What would you do if you were there?" Stay silent or speak truth to power. As the realization hit him, Edward finally understood. The very woman he mocked might have just saved his life. Edward's voice trembled as he held the phone to his ear. "Mr. Crane," his doctor said urgently, "your prescription was mislabeled. The dosage you have is 4 times too high. One pill could have triggered a stroke." The world seemed to tilt. He glanced at the label, the same one Rosa had been reading earlier. His hands shook. Rosa noticed immediately and stepped forward. "May I see it?" she asked gently. Without a word, he handed her the bottle. She turned it over, scanning quickly. "This label's wrong," she said. "It should read half the dosage." Her voice stayed calm, professional, not a trace of resentment. "If you'd taken this, it could have been fatal." The room went utterly silent. The same translator he'd mocked only minutes ago had just saved his life. Edward swallowed hard, eyes burning with shame. His voice cracked. "You just prevented a stroke." Rosa gave a small, tired smile. "I just translated." For the first time in years, Edward lowered his head, not in defeat, but in humility. He looked up at her, voice barely above a whisper. "How much does your mother's treatment cost?" The question hung in the air like a confession, raw and honest. Rosa blinked, unsure how to answer. For the first time, it wasn't about pride or status, it was about gratitude. "Share this if you still believe kindness heals more than medicine ever could." The next morning, when the pharmacy opened, customers stopped in their tracks. A handwritten letter from Edward Crane was taped to the door. The next morning, the pharmacy doors opened to a crowd staring at a white envelope taped to the glass. Inside, written in elegant handwriting, was a letter from Edward Crane. "In honor of the woman who reminded me that understanding saves lives, today I am founding the Delgado Fund for Medical Access. No one should ever go without care because of language, money, or pride." Below it, a note in smaller print. "Because kindness is the truest form of wealth." Rosa's hands trembled as she read it. Tears filled her eyes when she saw her mother's name listed among the first recipients of full treatment support. Weeks later, her mother's vision began to return. For the first time in years, she watched her daughter smile without hiding exhaustion. Edward visited the pharmacy quietly one afternoon. "No press, no cameras. Just a man changed." Rosa thanked him, but he shook his head. "No, thank you for translating what I'd forgotten. Humanity." The camera lingers on the counter. A young immigrant family stands before Rosa. Their daughter watches as Rosa helps her mother read a label in Spanish. The same warmth in her tone as always. Near the register hangs Edward's gold watch in a small donation box labeled "Time to Care." The hands on the face are stopped, forever marking the moment when pride finally paused for compassion. Subscribe for more stories, where small acts of humanity transform even the proudest hearts. What if the words we speak to help someone today are the very ones that save us tomorrow?